During the 1979 Iranian Revolution that swept that country and deposed the Shah and replaced him with the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, some Western nations' embassies were targeted. The American embassy was attacked and overrun, beginning a 444-day hostage situation that ruined the presidency of James Earl Carter and ushered in the era of Ronald Reagan. But the British embassy was also attacked, the structure damaged, and 6 personnel were taken hostage, but they were later released after an agreement was reached. But the Sunni Arab population in Iran, a minority, who helped in removing the Shah, were soon targeted by Khomeini's fundamentalist and strict Shi'a government. This would have wider repercussions far beyond the borders of Iran. What caused the Iranian embassy hostage crisis? Who was involved and why? What was the British mission? How was the situation resolved? What were the lasting effects of the mission? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. At 11:30 a.m. British time on Wednesday, April 30th, 1980, the Iranian Embassy at 16 Prince's Gate, South Kensington, saw 6 armed gunmen led by An Ali Mohammed, codenamed Salim, overpower Police Constable Trevor Locke of the Diplomatic Protection Service, who was on duty outside, and they forced their way into the building. The 6 terrorists took 26 people hostage, including British men from the BBC who were arranging travel and residence visas. The terrorists placed a call stating their demands. The terrorists self-identified as members of the Democratic Revolutionary Front for Arabistan, and they were protesting against the oppression of Khuzestan by Ayatollah Khomeini, who had just recently taken over the American Embassy in Tehran, starting that 444-day hostage situation. The terrorists wanted Iran to grant Khuzestan province independence, creating an Arab national sovereign state. They were retaliating for the 1979 Iranian Revolution crackdown on Arabs living in Khuzestan province who rose up and demanded autonomy. The Arabs in that region had supported the overthrowing of Shah Reza Pahlavi, but were then targeted themselves. Iranian security forces responded violently and left more than 100 Arab protesters dead, and many more were jailed. More than a dozen of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps were also killed. The terrorists also demanded the release of 91 political prisoners who were imprisoned in Iran. And during these negotiations, an aircraft to fly themselves along with their hostages out of the UK. The British government quickly rejected the demand for safe passage, and a siege ensued. Almost immediately after the seizure, the police cordoned off the area and snipers took up positions overlooking the building. All police and government agencies were brought into the scenario. The UK government's emergency committee, COBRA, was set up to monitor and manage the evolving crisis. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was informed, and the Special Air Service counter-terrorism team in Hereford was put on high alert, and B Squadron was placed on alert status. The Special Air Service was the original global counter-terrorism and commando unit, spawned during World War II, and they set the standard. The American equivalents today are SEAL Team 6 and U.S. Army's Delta Force, with other similar international units. The commandos quickly arrived in London and moved into a building close to the Iranian Embassy and formulated their immediate action plan, which is the operational plan to be implemented should a situation deteriorate before the actual assault and rescue mission can be launched. While preferring to have the time to gather good intelligence and formulate a detailed assault plan, it was decided that a contingency plan was needed if the terrorists started shooting hostages. First, they had to confirm how many hostages were actually in the building, and hopefully, who they were. Most were embassy staff, but also Constable Locke, who was taken hostage, 2 BBC journalists, and tourists who were collecting visas. Police negotiators were brought in to begin negotiations with the terrorists. During the early hours of the standoff, MI5 intelligence agents lowered microphones down the embassy's chimneys. Showing good faith, 5 hostages were released by the terrorists. Other listening devices were placed into the embassy's walls through holes drilled in from the outside, while a diversionary jackhammer was used out in the nearby street to mask the noise, and then tape recorders were turned on with Farsi and Arabic-speaking agents listening in. The SAS joined the police and MI5 agents and took up positions in other neighboring buildings. Aircraft were also asked to fly low over the embassy to also help cover the noise of drilling as they inserted listening devices into the walls. As this was going on, the SAS planners studied the building's original blueprints and spoke with the embassy janitor, learning the layout of the building and the placement of all the hallways, rooms, bathrooms, doors, and windows. The SAS plan was to place a small team on the roof after nightfall on the intended date of the mission and enter the building by rappelling down, entering through the selected windows once they determined where the terrorists and hostages were located to have the element of surprise. Over the first few days of the siege, Salim released several women hostages and a BBC employee who feigned stomach cramps in order to be released. By Monday, and with no sign of his demands being met, Salim's mood changed for the worse, and tensions rose. Salim then threatened to shoot a hostage. On Monday, Salim made good on his threat. Abbas Lavasani, an Iranian staffer who had displayed outward animosity towards the terrorist and had been previously separated from the rest of the hostages, was targeted. From the eavesdropping devices, it appeared that he was in a separate room alone. Then, at 12 p.m., 3 shots were heard from inside the embassy. The police and SAS did not know what prompted the shots or who was shot until later that evening when Lavasani's body was pushed out the front door. That action changed everything. British policy was not to use force unless hostages had either been killed or were at imminent risk of being killed. The murder meant that the SAS was to be unleashed. Home Secretary William Whitelaw, after consulting with the newly elected Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, then ordered the SAS to attack. With the use of force now authorized to end the situation, the telephone negotiations continued to stall for time as the commandos did their final preparations, while operational control was transferred from the Metropolitan Police to the Ministry of Defense. The approval was confirmed. Operation Nimrod was a go. The SAS operation started 20 minutes after the order was received, and the entire event was being relayed live in real time by TV cameras covering the embassy. As Salim was kept busy with the negotiators on the phone, the SAS moved to prepare for the hostage rescue mission, which called for the embassy to be stormed from all sides, with multiple assault teams simultaneously entering on all floors and through the roof. The SAS were now ordered to go in. 2 men carried Lavasani's body away from the building shortly before explosions rocked the building. What follows is how the operation was planned to go down. One team would enter down a stairway from the roof, lowering a large explosive device down through the skylight to cover their entry and cause maximum confusion and distract the terrorists. Another team would blast through the first-floor windows at the front of the embassy and enter via the balcony. A further team would sneak into the embassy's rear garden and blow the patio doors open, then clear the ground and hold the main staircase. Part of this team would also act as a reserve force and hostage reception team. The commandos on the roof were to rappel down to the second and first floor rear balconies and smash their way in through the windows. Another team would enter the ground floor through the rear doors and clear the basement rooms. This would provide security and distract any terrorist who may be encountered, removing them from the equation. As one of the rear teams rappelled down the building, one commando accidentally broke a window. prompting Salim to stop his diversionary conversation with the police negotiator to go and investigate the noise. At this point, the SAS commander realized the mission had been compromised, and, despite all the teams not being in their exact positions, he gave the order, "Go, go, go," over the radio. The team on the roof detonated their charges down the skylight, shaking the building and sending a plume of black smoke upward into the blue sky. Another massive explosion blasted open a first-floor window on the front of the embassy, and a four-man team rushed into the library. Despite the covert microphones and other surveillance devices monitoring conversations inside, the hostages were not where the rescuers expected them to be. The atmosphere in the building was thick from the breach explosives and CS gas. Some of the gas masks the commandos wore did not seal properly, affecting their vision. Inside, they found BBC soundman Sim Harris, who was quickly taken out to the safety of the balcony. Then, as the team moved into the corridor, they shot and killed a terrorist who had fled into another room. Harris's escape was watched by millions on live television. As he stated afterward, quote, "They were throwing in grenades and the room was burning, so I had to crawl out onto the balcony. And I was ready to jump, actually. I thought, well, if I could get out of this with a broken leg, I would be all right." End quote. Inside a room on the first floor, Salim, the terrorist leader, made a move towards the window. PC Trevor Locke, the hostage, tackled him, drew his pistol, which he had kept hidden since the siege began, and the two men began grappling for the weapon and each other. Moments later, two SAS men entered the room. They ordered Locke to roll clear of Salim, and as soon as he was clear, Salim was killed with a quick burst of fire from the trooper's MP5 submachine gun. At the rear of the embassy, an SAS trooper became entangled in his rappel gear and was hanging halfway down the wall. The stun grenades that had been thrown in through the windows below him had set the curtains on fire, and the flames were rising, and he was being burned alive. Other team members managed to cut him free, and he fell 10 feet to the ground but survived. As the noise alerted the terrorists who were inside the communications room on the second floor, they began firing at the hostages, killing one and wounding another. Then they dropped their weapons and hid among their hostages to avoid detection. One event that garnered unwanted attention for the SAS was when two of the terrorists were pushed against the wall and shot by the SAS. But the hostages were secured. The reserve teams were brought in to help get them out. The commandos covered the central staircase as each hostage was taken down and out of the rear doors into the back garden. Halfway down the stairs, a terrorist was identified hiding among the hostages holding a Russian grenade. Being unable to open fire on him without risking hitting the hostages or other troopers, one SAS man struck the terrorist in the head with the buttstock of his MP5. As soon as the man hit the floor at the base of the stairs, the commandos opened fire, killing him instantly. Once the hostages were all outside, they were all handcuffed and made to lie down until all identifications could be made. During a quick head count, the commandos saw that there was one too many hostages. That was when the BBC soundman, Sim Harris, identified a terrorist who was hiding with the hostages. One of the commandos took the identified terrorist back into the embassy, where it was believed that he was going to kill him, but other members of the team stopped the killing, and the terrorist, Fauzi Nejad, was arrested, and he was the only surviving terrorist. The standoff had lasted 6 days, but the entire mission from launch to conclusion only lasted about 11 minutes. 15 minutes in total if you include when the hostages finally reached the garden outside and Nejad was identified. With the hostages accounted for, both dead and alive, as well as for confirming all the terrorists were accounted for, the SAS men then departed. But the SAS, once in the shadows and only located within the pages of history books and the very seldom newspaper article, had just become very public due to the entire spectacle being broadcast live on British television and around the world. All 3 channels in the United Kingdom carried the drama in real time. The next day, the footage was shown worldwide. The mission so captivated the world that film and documentary makers covered this event for many years afterward. It was reality TV and drama that led to many fictionalized films and shows. In 1982, a British-American film was released titled The Final Option in the USA and also titled Who Dares Wins for the British market. It is a 1982 British political thriller focusing upon terrorists taking over the American Embassy in London. The film was directed by Ian Sharp, and the cast starred Lewis Collins, Judy Davis, Richard Widmark, Tony Doyle, and Edward Woodward. The film was panned by critics, but there was a bit of truth in the plot. Najad was convicted and jailed for life for conspiracy to murder, false imprisonment, and manslaughter, and he served 27 years in British prisons. He was released in 2008. The Iranian government, via Khomeini, had supported the SAS raid, and 13 years later a mutual compensation package was agreed to. The British government paid for the damage done to the Iranian Embassy in London caused by the rescue, and Iran, in turn, repaired the British Embassy in Tehran, which had been damaged during the 1979 revolution, where the 6 British hostages had been taken and the embassy had been badly damaged. But this hostage rescue mission also established a new standard worldwide. It was made abundantly clear that should British interests, citizens, or their security be threatened, they would be dealt with in a very direct, efficient, and violent way. It was learned later from the interrogation of Najad that the terrorists were trained by intelligence agents of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, who provided the cash, the guns, false passports, and the planning. In Iran, the siege proved disastrous for the Arab minority, as some of the dissidents already imprisoned were summarily executed, and the repression of the remaining Arab population, especially the Sunnis, was severely tightened. And another unintended consequence of this action was that the ethnic cleansing of the Arabs and Sunni Muslims would provide Saddam Hussein with his justification for starting the 8-year Iran-Iraq War 4 months later. Other nations around the world would study this operation and model their own special operations rescue teams on the SAS model. The Israelis had already created their own version, as well as the West German Grenzschutzgruppe 9, or GSG-9, after the Munich Olympics tragedy, and they were trained by the SAS. And the French Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie, better known as GIGN. The rescue mission was the first successful counter-terrorist assault to be shown on live television, and the first SAS operation ever caught on camera. Now, SAS and their motto, "Who Dares Wins," are revered and well known as the gold standard around the world. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.